Hello everyone, in this video we are going to talk about the reflex action. Let's see what does that mean. Imagine you're going to take a bath, but you forget to test the temperature of the water before you put the food in and it is very hot. By the time you realize that you have done this, you will already have reacted by pulling your food out. So this could happen even when you are touching a hot plate. The moment that you touch the hot plate without knowing, and you don't know that is hot, you immediately pull back your hand. The hot water is an example of a stimulus, and withdrawal of the food is a response. The response occurs within a fraction of a second. It happens very fast because it is carried out by neurons that transmit impulses, and it is very fast. And only a small number of junctions between neurons, which are called synapses, have to be crossed. It is probably the fastest type of response that a nervous system can make. So it is very fast. The endings of sensory neurons in the skin act as a thermoreceptors and detect the heat stimulus. So there will be a receptor system, and they will detect the stimulus, in this case, which is heat. And then they transmit the impulses to the spinal cord. And the sensory neurons have synapses with the association neurons, which in turn have synapses with motor neurons. So there is a kind of different types of things we will see in the next slide, which starts from the receptors, and then we have the sensory neurons, and then we have the spinal cord, and then the motor neurons. These motor neurons transmit impulses out of the spinal cord and on the muscles and onto the muscles in the leg, and which are stimulated to contract and pull the food out of the hot water. The connections made between sensory and motor neurons by the association neurons ensure that an appropriate response is made to the stimulus. This is a kind of picture that you can see how this system is working. So here, this is a hot bath, and the moment that you put your food into the hot bath, and you don't know that it is so hot, then you reflect as you're pulling back your food. How this happens is that there are sensory neurons at here in your skin. So this is the sensory neuron, and this sensory neuron passes the information from the hot bath and send it back to your here. That is again this sensory neuron is here. They passes the information by impulses into your spinal cord, and from the spinal cord the information will be back by motor neurons. So we have two types of neurons: sensory neurons and motor neurons. And motor neurons are attached to the muscles. So by the time that sensory neurons will receive and will pass the information or impulses from the hot bath to your spinal cord, immediately, without going to your brain, they will send the impulses through the motor neurons back to your muscles, and the muscles start to do the action like here. So the motor neurons have attached to muscles, and this muscle here which is attached to this bone, will cause that your foot will be pulled back automatically. So association neurons also transmit impulses up the spinal cord to the brain. This is how we become aware that we have put our foot into hot bath water and we have already responded. This type of simple response to a stimulus is a reflex. It is a useful way of responding very rapidly when the body is being harmed. This is very rapid reflection response. So here is the video. Let's watch the video together.
In reflex action, fine tips, that is dendrites of receptors, that is sensory neurons, quickly relay a message in the form of electric impulse via sensory nerves to the spinal cord. The spinal cord then sends information, impulse, via motor nerves to effectors, that is muscles or glands. The reflex actions generally involve spinal cord for quick response to specific stimulus, or otherwise the thinking process of brain may take time and delay the response, which may harm the animal. However, information input also goes on to reach the brain where thinking process occurs. The path taken by nerve impulse in a reflex action is called reflex arc. When our hand accidentally touches a hot object, the heat is sensed by thermoreceptors present in the skin of hands. The receptors trigger nerve impulses in sensory neurons. Sensory neurons transmit the message to the spinal cord. In spinal cord, impulse is passed on to the interneurons, which in turn pass it to the motor neurons. The motor neurons transmit the instruction to the muscles in our arm. The arm muscles contract and pull our hand away from the hot object. This is also referred as spinal reflex. Reflex arcs have evolved in animals because the thinking process of the brain is relatively slow. Reflex arcs have evolved as an efficient way of functioning in the absence of true thought processes. There are some reflexes which involve brain as well. They are termed as cerebral reflexes, for example, salivation at the sight or smell of food. Contraction of pupil of human eye in the presence of light. Significance of reflex action. 1. It avoids overloading of brain. 2. It results in quick response, otherwise the thinking process of brain may take time and delay the response, which may harm the animal.
Okay, did you watch the video? Now it's time to think, pair, share. What does it mean when we say that the withdrawal reflex is unconscious or involuntary? You need to pause the video and think about and answer the question. What is the advantage of carrying out the withdrawal reflex using the spinal cord rather than the brain? Discuss whether the withdrawal reflex is a reaction or an interaction. And can we be held responsible if we cause harm to others when we carry out the reflex action? What is the difference between voluntary and involuntary actions? So, if we can choose consciously whether or not to respond to a stimulus, the response is voluntary. For example, an athlete preparing for a race has to decide when to start sprinting out of the block. She exerts voluntary control over her muscles and can decide whether to contract them or not, either to initiate an action or not. So these are voluntary. Voluntary control is a function of parts of the cerebral hemispheres in the brain. The network of neurons in this part of the brain is much more complex than that in the spinal cord, and the decision about whether to contract a muscle or not is made by the combined action of many synapses. So it is a complex situation over here, and there is a decision which is made by your cerebral hemisphere part of your brain. It's not the same as your spinal cord, which is very fast and as a type of reflection. How are decisions made by the nervous system? Well, this is talking about the presynaptic and postsynaptic, and the explanation has been already made before we had it in our previous unit. Just as a review, let's see what has been written over here. A signal can only pass in one direction across a synapse. This ensures that impulses pass along nerve fibers in the correct direction. The neuron that brings the signal to the synapse is the presynaptic neuron, and the neuron that receives it is a postsynaptic neuron. So there is a presynaptic neuron and postsynaptic neuron. This is simply something like this. If we have the dendrites and we'll at the one side, and we have this area which is called axon, and the other side will be again another type of dendrite. So this is gonna be presynaptic neuron, and will be pass the information using neurotransmitter to the next neuron, and that would be postsynaptic neuron. So the one which is previously having the information, sending the impulses to the next one, so that is called, this will be presynaptic, and this one would be postsynaptic. That's so simple. When an impulse reaches the end of presynaptic neuron, it triggers the release of a chemical. This is what I said, chemical. And there are many different possible chemicals which are known as collectively as neurotransmitters. So these chemicals are called neurotransmitters, but only one type is released at each synapse. Depends on the type of the neurotransmitter actually. The neurotransmitter diffuses across the synaptic gap. This is the gap. This area is gap. This area is gap. And binds to special receptor proteins in the membrane of the postsynaptic neuron. So it will be released here and will be bind to postsynaptic neuron. This is described in chapter 4. So we have already discussed about this before. Neurotransmitters cause the voltage across the membrane of the postsynaptic neuron to change. So if I go back to this slide, there is a postsynaptic change of the voltage, which causes the different millivoltage, if you consider here. And this neurotransmitter causes the different voltage. This means that they are triggering the ion channels to open, and then the sodium, for example, from outside go inside, and causes the difference between the positive and negative, between outside and inside. And that's the way that we are talking about the impulses passing from one neuron to the other one. And we study this as a action potential. So, but here we are focusing on another definition, which is excitatory and inhibitory. we classify neurotransmitter into two types, depending on the direction of the change. What is excitatory? Excitatory neurotransmitter cause the postsynaptic neurons membrane voltage to rise. So from the name you can understand actually they excite, they are making excited, they are exciting, they are rising, and they are causing the impulses to pass. So they tend to cause an impulse. Inhibitory, they are doing the opposite way. So this means that they cause the voltage to become more negative, so an impulse will only be triggered with a larger amount of excitatory neurotransmitter. So they are doing in a negative way, and this means that they don't allow or they don't want that the impulses will be sent out. And an impulse is triggered in the postsynaptic neuron whenever the voltage across its membrane reaches -50. And the impulse is transmitted away from the synapse, and the membrane of the postsynaptic neuron returns to -70. Fast. Okay, here is another video, and we are going to watch this in the next video. Hope you enjoyed the first video.